Welcome. I'm Michael Bickert. Thanks for joining me today as we explore concepts with the objective of improving your management skills and growing your business. Pause the video right now so that you can grab a notepad and a pen because I want your commitment that you will jot down something actionable that you will implement in your business today. Remember, that's why we do this. Start every day with some kind of inspiration, just thinking about your business, a little bit of self-analysis and analysis of your business, and implement something that you can improve, okay? All right, today I want to talk to you about avoiding undermining the people whom you empower. So think about it. Think about who are the stakeholders in your organization who you empower, and do you ever undermine them, either intentionally or unwittingly? If so, stop immediately. So I think of a sort of a prime example in my career. Many years ago, I was fairly new on the job. I was a sales manager, and my very top salesperson, and he was not just top by a little bit, he was outshining the nearest performance within our sales team next to him by quite a margin. And he was fairly consistent. And he called a meeting with me and my boss. And I wasn't sure what this would be about. However, I had an inkling it wasn't going to be good. Anyway, what it turned out was he had been headhunted, quote unquote, by the competition. The nearest competitor had offered him a job, and they really gave him a sweet offer in terms of remuneration and benefits package. And he outlined that for us. And my boss and I sat there and listened to him. And when he was finished, my boss started to respond to him. And he was starting to respond in a way where he started to match everything that was being offered by the competition. And I said, just a minute, can I talk? And my boss said, no. And that really irritated me. And he continued on and wanted to address the situation himself. Now, this might be an extreme example where you think, well, of course, that was unprofessional. He shouldn't have done that. However, in fairness to him, I understand where he's coming from. As I mentioned, this guy was a very important part of our team and our success. We weren't overly successful at that time, and this guy was one sort of shining light. And I should also mention that I hadn't hired that salesperson. He preceded me in employment in that organization, and my boss was the one that hired him. Anyway, that was an area where I think looking back, my boss would have went, yeah, I should have maybe handled that differently. I want to come back to that in a moment and how I handled that. But I want you to think about, do you have any examples you can think of where somebody, when you were in a position of authority in management, maybe your boss or another stakeholder undermined you, and you want to avoid that at all costs? And the reason why, I think the number one reason why, is that it erodes trust. And trust is something that you should be seeking to instill throughout the culture of your organization. It's such a powerful value and such a powerful cultural characteristic that you really should go out of your way to instill trust. So Dr. Stephen Covey, in his book, I think it is in his book, Principle-Centered Leadership, he talks about that trust is a precursor to empowerment. In fact, what he says is trustworthiness should be a prerequisite for anyone on your team, and you can't make someone else trustworthy. You can only work on your own trustworthiness. And if somebody is trustworthy, then you and he can trust one another. You can have a relationship of trust. And that's a precursor to empowerment, which should be an aspiration. And he points out that effective organizations are filled with empowerment. It should be a goal that you empower your people. We talk about delegation and being in this concept where you may be the best in your organization and you can handle any task better than anyone else, but how effective would you be if everything fell on your plate to be able to handle? You need to be able to rely on the other stakeholders, the other people within your business to be able to carry out various tasks. And that's where delegation comes in. And in order to be effective at delegating, you need to be able to empower people to make decisions, trusting that they have your best interest at heart. Now, there are reasons, I suppose, that we undermine people in authority, that we've given that authority, that we've empowered. And I think one of the reasons why is that you may not trust them to make a good decision. It may be that you trust them in terms of, from a financial aspect, you trust them in terms of honesty. You don't believe that they would mislead you, but you don't trust their judgment, or you think that they lack experience or some kind of expertise or wisdom in a particular area, and you undermine them. I think it's also more common, at least as common, that we undermine people unwittingly and unknowingly. I can think of several examples. And again, being fair to my boss that I described a moment ago, I was guilty of undermining my people on more than one occasion. And this is really where I want you to pay attention, because these examples, I think, run rampant through a lot of organizations where you don't realize that you're undermining someone. And where this occurs is that another stakeholder, it's often another team member, may approach you for something that you're not directly responsible for. But being the boss, you certainly can make a decision, and they'll ask you a question, or they'll ask you a question that maybe leads to a decision. And because it's something that you do have the expertise on, you know the answer, you can quickly make a judgment call, and you respond more or less out of habit or reaction, just simple reaction. I want you to stop when that occurs. If somebody who does not report to you directly comes and asks you a question, the first thing I want you to do is consider whether or not you should be answering this question. And frequently the answer will be no, you should not be answering this question. And instead, what your mind should be doing is going, why are they asking me this? And we have this human nature thing where we want to be helpful, and we're proud of the knowledge we have. And sometimes when someone asks a question, you're very proud of the fact that you know the answer and your expertise can shine in front of everybody. But I want you to default in your mind to, should I be answering this question? And then what you can do is explore a little bit more and ask why this situation is occurring, why they're coming to you. So that's what I got in the habit. And it was a habit I had, or a skill that I had to develop. It didn't come to me naturally. I was far more reactionary in terms of my desire to automatically want to respond to questions. Most people are, in fact. So ask yourself, is that part of your nature? Are you the type of person who, before you respond, you're very sort of insightful and you think about something, you analyze the situation before you respond? And that's a good thing. If not, slow down and do that. So what I would do is I'd ask myself, I wonder why this person is coming to me. I mean, they don't work for me directly. I'm not their supervisor. There are other places they could get this information. Why are they in front of me right now? And I would consider the possibility that they may be trying to divide and conquer. There's a possibility that they know the answer, or they don't like the response they might get from their own direct supervisor, and so they're going above his or her head. And certainly that's a situation where if you realize that and you responded, you would be intentionally undermining the authority of the person that you've empowered to make those decisions, the person to whom you've delegated that responsibility. You should never do that, because as we said, it erodes trust with that person. And so stop and think, ask yourself, and it's probably in most cases less, or it's more benign, it's less sinister than that. The person coming to ask you the question maybe couldn't urgently find her supervisor immediately, and you were available, so they wanted a quick response, so they came to you. But still, you can have all the deleterious effects of undermining someone else's empowerment and authority. So what you want to do is you want to slow down, and maybe often what I did is I've accompanied the person. I said, well, let's go ask together. And then it was very common I found afterward when I was speaking to their supervisor, we've covered this. That person and I have went through this together, and I'm not very happy that they went above my head to you or whatever. But there are all sorts of reasons that this can happen. The key for you is to slow down. So let's think about what are the negative effects. We already said it undermines trust, and the trust between you and your key people. I mean, these people that you have empowered, you've worked hard to have that relationship of trust. And I said at the beginning of this conversation, of this discussion, that it's imperative that you have a culture of trust. So for goodness sakes, don't erode the trust that you've worked so hard to build. The other thing it does is it can really inhibit learning and development of your people. By them having to make decisions and having to solve problems at their level, they learn, they gain the experience that they may lack. So that lack of confidence you might have in their judgment. Remember, we said you may trust them from a honesty point of view, but you may have a lack of trust in their judgment just because they're newer in management or something like that. You're again inhibiting an opportunity for them to grow and learn. So they have to go through the mental exercise of making a decision. And if they make the wrong decision, you should be there to stand behind them because you've empowered them. You should understand that when you empower someone, they're going to make poor decisions occasionally. And we can talk about what to do in those cases. But what you should not do is cut them off at the knees and undermine them before they have the opportunity to make those decisions. Think about it. Your experience, some of the things, the lessons that you've learned the best have come from making the wrong decision and suffering some consequences as a result of that. In my example, if I made a really poor decision and we lost this key sales team member, that might have been invaluable for the organization for me to have learned that. And how much better off would the organization have been having me as a manager that learned the hard way something that stuck forever? That's not how that one played out, but that's just an example of don't deprive your people of learning and growth management opportunities that they may have by making the decision. You also will compromise their confidence. If they see that every time they need to make a decision that it may be scrutinized by the boss, and it's not every time actually, but if they see occasionally, periodically, the boss swoops in and he undermines my authority, what message that sends? Besides eroding trust and inhibiting those learning opportunities, it also can degrade the person's confidence in their abilities. And you don't want that either. You need your team, the people you rely on, to have confidence, and you don't want them second guessing themselves constantly. That confidence, you know, sometimes it's well placed, sometimes it's misplaced. But again, you need your team carrying out their responsibilities so that they will grow and develop. And this is another disadvantage of undermining people who you empower. Now, we've touched on reasons why you might be inclined to do this, either intentionally or unwittingly, where we said that you may have a lack of trust in the person's judgment, or, you know, it's reactionary. You just sort of a knee-jerk reaction where you answer questions immediately. And that's kind of that unwittingly thing. That's the one that I want you. It's kind of insidious. You want to be careful. That can sneak in when you're not looking. And you don't even know that it's happening. That's where it's kind of, you know, maybe unfair of me to say, ask yourself, do you do this? You may not recognize it. You might need your people to point it out to you. So ask your people, hey, do I ever undermine you? Do you ever feel that? And if you lack any kind of trust culture in your organization and a really solid relationship of trust, built on trust with your people, they're not likely to be candid with you and telling you whether or not you ever undermine. Oh, no, boss, you're great. Everything's wonderful. You should have a relationship and a culture in which your people feel completely at ease if they want to give you some justified criticism, and justified in their mind. You can certainly dispute it and discuss it. But since we've explored a little bit and touched a little bit on why you might do this, let's look at what should you do instead. And I'll go back to this story. So I was really annoyed and I was just sort of boiling. My blood was boiling when my boss did that and offered him all these things. And then I did get an opportunity to speak. And I basically confirmed what my boss had said to him. I said, okay, we're going to give you those things, but I want you to know we're going to give them to you because you deserve them. You're worth that. You have earned that, and your performance currently justifies what we're saying we're going to give you today. Should your performance change in the future and you no longer warrant this extra remuneration, these extra perks that you're getting, well, we'll have to reevaluate. And not only that, but anyone else on the team now or in the future who also performs at a level where they've earned this, they will get them too. So I don't want you to think this is about you specifically. Instead, what it is about is rewarding. And I guess we have not rewarded you to the degree that we should. We believe in a meritocracy, and you merit these things. Clearly, we believe that. We're going to give them to you, but we're going to give them to anyone else who also merits them. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the pay plan. And that began a thing where I revamped the whole pay plan. And all of a sudden, we started attracting a lot of high performers to our team. So what was I doing there is, number one, I'm analyzing the situation and I'm asking myself how we got in that situation to begin with. And I'm asking you to do that. I think you're going to find a lot of times that the reason that people undermine those whom they empower is because there is a lack of alignment of objectives. And so when I talk about what should you do to address these situations instead of undermining people, is you should let the situation play out and then you should evaluate whether or not. Now, of course, this isn't always going to be easy because you may not know about the decisions. There can be decisions that are made below your radar, so to speak, and they may be causing problems that you're unaware of. But when you do become aware of a challenge like this, you never want to correct your person in front of his team. And that is another way that you're going to undermine him. Instead, bring that person aside and gain intelligence, gain some insight into their way of thinking. I like to ask people, tell me about the decision you made there. And why did you do that? Sometimes I'm very pleasantly surprised that they have a great rationale and they had some more information that I lacked. I would have made a different decision. I was scrutinizing their decision and I thought, that doesn't sit well with me. I don't know why they did that. And then later I find out, okay, I was missing a few pieces of the puzzle there. Another reason you should not step in where, it's already been empowered to somebody else. Let them handle it. Later, go and ask them. And it may be that they tell you the whole thing and they didn't have any other information. And actually, their thought process you disagree with. That's perfectly fine. Now you have a coaching moment. Now you have an opportunity to work with your person and tell them how your thought process would be. You don't need your people to do everything the exact way you would, but you do want to align your interests and want to make sure that you have the same objectives. And I would ask a person, what was your objective in that decision? What were you trying to accomplish? And then I might say, is that not at odds with this other objective that I have or that that person has or whatever? Then you get a real opportunity as a team to put your heads together and try to solve the problem for the future. And that's one of the obligations you have in management, is to clarify your expectations of people and hold them accountable. So those coaching moments, you never want to miss out on those. The examples I've given up to this point really sort of revolve around other team members, and depending on your business, this may not be applicable to you. You may have a very small team and your management hierarchy is pretty flat. You don't have that many levels of management and different levels within your organization. But I've seen this happen with other stakeholders such as vendors and customers. It's not uncommon with customers. So you have somebody on the front lines who's handling a customer concern. They're responsible for customer service and logistically carrying out the operations of your business. And you might step in and undermine them by doing something for the customer that they denied or that's different. I get this. You know, customers are so valuable, and you might observe something and step in. I've seen the situation happen all the time. Again, I think it's a mistake. I understand it. I understand that you wish to preserve the customer. There are other ways to handle this. Instead, what I would have you do is, again, wait for that situation to have resolved itself or not resolved itself, you know, basically to play out as it's going to play out, and then take the person aside where it's a coaching opportunity, a moment, and you can ask them. Once again, with customers, just like I said with the team member, they may have information that you lack. Like, this is the third time that guy has done that to us, boss, or I know this guy, and there's something else at play here that you aren't witnessing, da 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 da. Or the person may not have good rationale for what they did. They may have been, one of their not greatest moments on the job where they let their emotions get the best of them, or something like that, or they just made a poor decision. These people aren't necessarily in management. Everyone can make poor decisions, and there's your opportunity to grow that person. As much as I would have you try to retain every single customer you can, maybe you lose a customer, but you retain a really good team member that you're investing in, and you don't undermine that trust, or you don't erode that trust, and you don't inhibit that growth moment and the coaching moments and all the various opportunities you have to grow your business the right way. And so, depending on the type of business you have, you might be able to have that person go back to the customer and sort of make amends or do something if they made a mistake. And if that opportunity is lost, it's lost. You're not going to be perfect in business. You're going to make some mistakes. You're going to lose some customers. But I think it's a greater mistake, let's call it, to undermine the authority of the people that you empower by getting involved and sort of overruling them, making decisions for them. And it's not always overruling them. Sometimes you're going out and you are just doing things for them that they are responsible for. So in my example of the customer, maybe the customer complains to you directly. You should not respond to the customer directly. You can respond by saying, depending on how the customer complaint came in, it might be through email or through a chat, or I'm not sure how it got on your desk, so to speak, but you want to make sure that these things are handled by the people that are empowered to handle them. The people that you've delegated this responsibility to, they need to do it. So that's the same situation here. You might say to the customer, oh, you know what, just a moment here. Let me get the person in charge of that. And they might see that you're the manager, you're the owner. They might know you specifically. This happens all the time. It can happen with your best customers and the people who know you very well. They might come to you, and you might, what I'm saying you need to do is say, actually, I empower so-and-so to handle that. I trust his judgment, so I'm going to align myself with him. You may literally use those word tracks right there. And that should be what you do. Then later, always later, come back to it and address it with the person who's making the decision, so that you can discuss how you can continually improve and make good judgment calls. And when you find that there is a lack of alignment in your objectives or your incentives, then you can address that. You can address that at that moment. If you fail to do this, if you ignore this advice, and you either intentionally or unwittingly continue to engage in behaviors and the bad habit of undermining your people, you will find as a symptom that you constantly have too much on your plate. And your people aren't going to probably last. Your people, there's going to be lots of symptoms. But I urge you, in your own self-interest, remember, we all act in our own self-interest. In your own self-interest, do this so that your people will grow, which will free up your time to work on those things that you do best. If you fail to do this and you are undermining your people, you're either going to have, you're going to create a culture where everybody waits for the boss. And you just don't want that. That's not an effective organization. In fact, ask yourself, does everybody wait for you for a decision? If so, it's probably because you're doing this. You're telling people that they have empowerment, but they know that it's lip service. It's not real. In effect, the boss has to make all the decisions and you're not really standing behind them. That is a bad culture. You don't want to have that. So with so many of these videos, this came up recently. And in fact, I had a customer who came to me over something that I rely on somebody else for. And this happens all the time. But I told the customer, okay, well, I wasn't involved. I don't have all the information. So thanks for bringing it to my attention. At this point, if you're asking me for a decision right now, I stand behind my manager's decision. And I always will. That's what he's there for. However, I'll dig into it a little bit deeper if you want. And you really need to do that. All right, so that's where we're going to leave it today. I'm curious if you've ever had this situation come up. Are you maybe oblivious to when it's happening in your organization? Are you in denial that you do this? We discuss these things so that you can really do a self-analysis, some introspection, and you can figure out different ways to improve your business. I want to hear from you, and I want to hear where you disagree, where you agree. Share some comments. Share something that we can all learn from. Perpetual refinement.